Yo, what is up guys, Scarface Mike here, and welcome to the top 5 decks of the January 2014 ban list in my opinion. Now this is based off the success of decks and what I believe would have been the best deck to go into a big tournament and come out with the first place position in this format. So this format's only got about a month left, and I think the new ban list will probably be announced in about 2 weeks or something along those lines. So let me know in the comment section below what your top 5 would have been of this format, and if you disagree or agree with my choices. So let's get straight into it. And to start things off, in at number 5 I have Heretics, or probably best said to say Heretic Rulers, because that was definitely the best build of Heretics with the Dragon Rulers included. And what the Dragon Rulers really did was increase consistency to this deck, because this deck was very inconsistent before with just Heretics, but with the Dragon Rulers it added consistency. And early on in the format it had a lot of hype, and we saw Heretic Seal from the Ashes go from like $2 to $30. I think it was mainly because of Patrick Hoban. He was using Heretics early on in the format, but eventually he moved on. So this deck had a lot of hype early on, but then as the format went on, I know the hype sort of died down, and we realized that it was not the best deck of the format. But as you can see, this is just sort of a general build that many of the Heretic Rulers players would use. You know, you got the normal monsters. Probably the most used normal monster was What-tailed Dragon, and then you got a few others such as Flameville God, level 1 Synchro. And basically the main aim of the deck is to get out a tomb, and then that basically starts your combos. It's a very combo heavy base deck. It lacks a bit of consistency, but as I said before, with the Dragon Rulers it added a little bit more consistency to the deck. But what it does lack is a lot of recovery. If your opponent uses a torrential tribute against you and you're going all in, you know, this deck struggles to recover from that. But having said that, it's got a lot of OTK potential, and you know, if you get the right cards in your hand, the right combo cards, you can pretty much win in a single turn. So that's the plus side to the deck, but you know, it's got a lot of high OTK potential. So I would say it's a tier 2 deck at the moment in this format, or maybe 1.5, but probably a tier 2 deck, and that's why I have it at number 5. Moving on guys, at number 4 I have Prophecy. Now at the beginning of the format, a lot of people were saying Prophecy or Spellbooks is going to be the best deck in this format. It was going to be tier 1, no doubt about it. And early on I would have believed that, because they were getting a lot of tops in the regionals and were doing quite well at the YCS Sydney. It did quite well, got a few tops. I think 2 Prophecy decks made it into the top 8. But as the format went on, we saw that Prophecy sort of died out, and then by the end not many people were using it. In fact, at YCS Berlin, not one Prophecy deck made the top 32. So as you can see, it clearly died down, but I still think it's a very good deck. There's sort of 2 builds to it. You got the World build, where you would have World of Prophecy and Temperance, but there's also the High Priestess build with Justice of Prophecy, and I think both builds are very good. This one is the World build, as you can see. Just thought I'd show you guys, and it's obviously based around with the spell books, and then you would get out Temperance and then eventually get out World of Prophecy. That's the aim of the deck. But the Priestess build is still very good as well, and did fairly well as well. But I would have to say I only had it at number 4, and what I would say with this deck is its weakness is it is very slow. You know, you got a few turns that you have to use a few turns to just build up and get the right cards in your hand before you can get out your World of Prophecy or High Priestess. So that's the problem with the deck. It's very slow, but once you get to the cards you need and get the monsters on the field, it's a pretty powerful deck. And obviously it has Spellbook of Fate at 1 now. Obviously before it was at 3, but it got dropped down to 1, and I think that's why the deck didn't do quite as well as people would have thought. But Spellbook of Fate is still probably the best card in the whole entire Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just an incredible card. You know, it's got 3 different effects that you can use. But in the end, spellbooks didn't quite make the top 3 in my opinion, but was still a very good deck throughout the format. Moving on into number 3, and we have Yugioh, or you could say Yugioh Karakuri. Pretty consistent deck, but I would say it's probably not as consistent as something like Fire Fist, but it's still one of the most consistent decks in the current format, and that's probably because of Yugioh Armor. It's just a really strong deck, really good card, and a really good search of the deck. The main aim of this deck is probably to get out the synchro monsters and then just destroy your opponent with them. A really good play with this deck is special summon Accelerator when you got Yugioh Armor on the field, or even Yugioh Arsenal, and then you would special summon Genix Ali Birdman, returning Accelerator, and then you can just special summon Accelerator again, and then you can synchro summon Karakuri Beret, and then use its effect to get out Karakuri Watchdog, and then you can get out Karakuri Burrito. So then you've got the two synchro monsters, Beret and Burrito, and they both got 2800 and 2600, so that's probably the best play with this deck, and the probably most used combo play with this deck, and that's probably how this deck won most of their games. Also a really strong card is Gear, obviously to get out some of the rank 4 XC monsters. You probably have a bit more rank 4 monsters than this, but yeah, Gigant X probably the most used of the rank 4 monsters, but I would say a few of them would have number 101 and Exciter Knight in this build as well. And the fusion monsters are there for the instant fusion. Some people with Yugioh Karakuri used instant fusion, but not all of them. It depends on what you like, but I think it's a really consistent deck, but not as consistent as Fire Fist. Also, it's a pretty slow deck in my opinion, just to get all the combo pieces you need, so that's the problem with the deck. And now in at number 2 we have Fire Fist, so maybe a bit of a controversial choice, and it's clear that in this format that in the end it was basically between fire and water, and in my opinion fire was just not as good as water at the end, but Fire Fist definitely got the most tops in this format so far, but I still think Mermails at the end of the format was probably the most successful, and water was definitely beating fire a lot more in YCS Berlin than it was at the beginning of the format. So this deck is probably the most consistent deck in the whole format. There's many versions of Fire Fist. This one is +1 Fire Fist, but you also get 4 axis and 3 axis and a few other ones as well. But probably the most successful Fire Fist deck was definitely the +1 Fire Fist. That really came about at YCS Atlanta, and it was very successful. At YCS Atlanta, Fire Fist just completely dominated the whole event, and then probably by YCS Berlin, Mermails was much better, and that's why I have Mermails at number 1 instead of Fire Fists. And the main weakness to this deck is it doesn't have any really OTK potential. The combo cards are very limited. It's basically just a grind beat down deck. You know, if you draw a certain hand, it's not like an instant win, such as something like Mermails or Heretics. It's just a slow beat down deck, and that's how it wins its duels most of the time. It's very consistent though, and you always get your plays off fairly easily. It's got easy access to the rank 4s with Tenzu as well as Wolfbach. So, and as you know, not Wolfbach, as you know, the rank 4s are very overpowered monsters at the moment, and rank 4s are just definitely the best extra deck sort of cards you can have at the moment, especially with the new ones, number 101 as well as Exciter Knight. But I still believe Water or Mermails just overtook Fire Fist by the end of the format. And finally, now bringing you to number 1, as you already know pretty much, it is Mermails, and this is the build that won YCS Berlin. And Mermails are pretty interesting. At the beginning of the format, they weren't doing that well. In fact, you know, they weren't getting that many tops. They didn't really do that well at YCS Sydney compared to something like Fire Fists or even Prophecy was doing just as good as Mermails. But by the end of the format, it's definitely the best deck, and it's come out and on top. It's just got a lot of combo plays, and it probably started at not YCS, ARG Charlotte with Patrick Hoban's build. He won with Mermails, and from that you basically see Reckless Greeds and Upstarts used in every Mermail deck. This one didn't use Upstarts, but it did use Reckless Greed, and Reckless Greed added consistency to the deck. The deck did lack a little bit of consistency, but Reckless Greed helped the consistency, and I'd say Mermails is a lot more consistent than Heretics, and that's why it's better than Heretics, as well as it has a bit more recovery power compared to Heretics, and that's why they're both very similar decks. They're both very combo orientated, but the recovery and consistency side is a little bit better with Mermails, and that's why it's such a good deck. It's not as consistent as Farfus, obviously, but it has a lot more OTK potential. And as I said before, it didn't do that well at the beginning of the format, but by the end it was clear that, in my opinion, Mermails was the best deck, and Water had overtaken Fire as the best deck. And there's so many different combos with this deck, and it's a very skillful deck. It's very hard to use and to know all the combos you can use. A really good well-known one is when you have Sturge in your hand, not in your hand, in your graveyard. Then you would normal or special summon Abyss Spike, maybe, or off Abyss Lindy when it gets destroyed. And then you could discard Gund to add Marksman to your hand, and then you would special summon Sturge and then discard Marksman, pop your opponent's back row, and then add Gund back to your hand. So that was just a really well-known and dirty combo to use with Mermails that won Mermails quite a few games, in fact. And obviously it's got a lot of access to the rank 4s, some of the rank 3s as well, and then the rank 7s. You got Big Eye, Draco Sack, and Gaio Abyss. They're both really overpowered, well, not overpowered, but really strong rank 7 cards to use, or XC monsters to use. Yeah, so in my opinion, they definitely overtook Farfus by the end of the format. Compared to the beginning of the format, they weren't doing that well, but by the end, they were definitely, in my opinion, the best deck in this format. So we'll see how the next format goes. We've still got a few weeks with the current format. It was a pretty short format, just the 3 months, and there's still actually a month to go, but I think the ban list gets announced fairly soon, a few weeks. And then the next format, I believe, goes for 6 months, so it's going to be a long one. So it's going to be interesting to see if Konami, makes a lot of changes or not many changes. In my opinion, this format's been one of the most diverse and definitely one of the best ones for a long time. You could use many different decks. Before, for a long time, you could just use Dragon Rulers, and Dragon Rulers would just dominate all the events.